it's Emily, and today, in honor of Nonfiction November, I'm here to bring you a review of one of my all-time favorite nonfiction books, The Peabody Sisters, Three Women Who Ignited American Romanticism by Megan Marshall. I read this book for the second time in October, so it's fresh in my mind, and also I've never seen it talked about on BookTube, so I figured it deserved some love. The book came out in 2005 and was published by Mariner Books. The Peabody sisters are Elizabeth, Mary, and Sophia Peabody. They lived in Massachusetts in the early 1800s, most notably in the Boston area. Each woman, as the subtitle of the book states, had an impact on the American Romanticism movement. American Romanticism is closely related to the Transcendentalist movement, which is a religious movement in New England in the early 1800s, where people were starting to move away from the idea of God being solely the purview of the traditional church. Transcendentalists believed that individuals could experience God in their own way, that they didn't need the help of a church, and some transcendentalists even went so far to say that men had totally created God. There is also a lot of focus on nature and finding God in nature versus finding Him in a church in Transcendentalism. Transcendentalism is also associated with people like Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Bryson Alcott, and of course the Peabody sisters. There are two reasons why I like this biography so much: the substance and the style. The substance is, of course, the life of the three sisters and then some of the history of the Transcendentalist movement. The style is that the book is told in parts where each era of the sisters' life is a separate chapter. In my experience, when a book is a group biography, each chapter follows like one person, and then the next chapter goes to the next person, and then the next chapter goes to the next person, and then it circles back to the first person. But in this book, the three sisters are grouped based on what they were doing. So for example, there was a period where Mary and Sophia went to Cuba together, and so we see what they were doing in Cuba for a chapter. And then we go back, in the next chapter, we go back to what Elizabeth was doing. Then later, Elizabeth and Mary lived together, so that chapter is a chapter about them living together, and then the next chapter after that is Sophia by herself. And actually, the book spends the first 50 pages talking about the life of the girl's mother, who was the first Elizabeth Peabody. The first Elizabeth Peabody had some trauma in her early life that made her determine that her daughter would have enough education and agency to make their own way in the world if they needed to. This gives you great insight into why the sisters were raised the way they were. And actually, the Peabody men in the mother and daughter's generations were weaker than the women. The Peabody women definitely, had all the power and dominated the family dynamics. As is pretty typical with biographies, Marshall not only talks about the sisters' lives, but she also sets the Peabody sisters into the bigger issues of their time. One interesting issue that she talks about is Sophia's migraines. Sophia was an invalid due to various migraines and then other physical ailments. Now there's some evidence that Sophia's health problems were caused by medicine she was given as a child that we would consider poisonous today. So Sophia was definitely ill, but Marshall also discusses how in this age, when women did not have much power, illness could be used as a way to get power. Sophia's migraines were so bad that she had to have complete silence in the house, which of course controlled what everybody else in the family did. Marshall also quotes from Oliver Sacks's book and talks about how migraines can be connected to emotional stress, and Sophia did get better in times when the family were more financially well off. So it's just interesting to see how sickness could be used to give women more agency in this time. Another big topic in this book is education. The girls' mother was a teacher, and she was a very creative teacher. Boys' schools at this time were very focused on rote learning, and also boys' schools could be violent places, with teacher abuse being very prominent at this time. Because girls could not go to traditional schools or to college, there was a lot more creativity in the classroom. In female classrooms, the girls' mothers encouraged her daughters and her students to learn Latin, and Elizabeth in particular was very intelligent. She was reading and writing college-level arguments when she was about 12. She also got into religious debates as a teenager. The divinity of Christ was a hot topic in New England during this time, and Elizabeth jumped into the fray. In a lot of ways, Elizabeth is the star of this book. Now, don't get me wrong, it's definitely a group biography, but Elizabeth was just so dynamic. And she was also the one who was closest to the Transcendentalist movement. She was friends with Ralph Waldo Emerson. She assisted at Bronson Alcott's school, and she actually was basically the first person to set out the Transcendentalist precepts. And this was way before anybody else was talking about this kind of movement. When she originally wrote up her thoughts on what would later become Transcendentalism, nobody would publish her essays. It wasn't until Ralph Waldo Emerson started talking about the same things that people started to sit up and take notice. Elizabeth also ran a bookstore in Boston for several years that became the Transcendentalist meeting spot. She ordered books from Europe that no other bookstore in Boston had. She was very good at cultivating friendships with the powerful men of Boston at this time, and as a result, she gained access to their books, to their children for her various schools, and to their prestige. The book discusses how Elizabeth came to see her role in life as someone who sort of launched intelligent young men into the world, which to us sounds sad, but actually made her pretty powerful in the society that she lived in. Elizabeth was also always trying to push her sisters into making more connections as well, which they did not appreciate. This book ends with the marriages of Sophia and Mary. Mary married Horace Mann, and their courtship, and predominantly the tensions it caused between Elizabeth and Mary, are a big aspect of the book. Sophia married Nathaniel Hawthorne, who wrote The Scarlet Letter. Their courtship is also a big part of the book because they were engaged for 3 years, and we see their decision-making process in determining when their wedding was going to take place. But I think the fact that the book ends with the marriages of Sophia and Mary just shows how the sisterhood of these 3 women is what the book is really looking at, not the women themselves. Once Sophia and Mary moved on to the next stage of their life, the book goes to the afterword and just gives us a brief summary of the sisters' later in life accomplishments. Elizabeth never married, but she became well known for her education advocacy and reform and for establishing the first kindergarten in America. The highest recommendation I could give you for this book is the fact that it's 600 pages and I've now read it twice. Granted, the last 100 pages are notes, but still, it's a fabulous book. It was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize in Biography and Memoir in 2006, and I can see why. Definitely let me know if you've read this book down in the comments. I would love to see this book showcased more on BookTube. I hope you're all reading some wonderful nonfiction books right now, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye!